You ever get the feeling someone's trying to push you out of your own house? I'm not talking about noisy neighbors or rising property taxes, I mean a full-blown, coordinated effort to get you gone. That's what happened to me the second I stood up to our HOA president, Cheryl Oakley. Middle-aged, sharp bob haircut, voice like a smoke alarm, and a personality that made you want to fake your own disappearance. I'm Kellan Grady. I bought my place in the Pinebrook Trails subdivision 2 years ago. Small, single-story ranch house with a brick facade and a back deck I built myself. I'm a contractor, nothing fancy, but I know how to keep my place in shape. Which is why Cheryl and her little HOA squad couldn't find a single real violation against me. Not that it stopped them from trying. It all started when Cheryl knocked on my door one Sunday morning, holding a clipboard like it was a badge. "Mr. Grady," she said, already annoyed that I answered the door wearing a gray t-shirt and eating a bowl of cereal. "Your mailbox is 1.3 inches higher than regulation. You'll need to correct that by Friday." I blinked. "You measured my mailbox. We survey all properties quarterly for compliance," she said, stiff as a board. "Right, and this is the biggest issue in the neighborhood." She narrowed her eyes. "Rules are rules." I told her I'd get right on it and closed the door. Didn't touch the mailbox. And that's when the real fun began. Over the next few weeks, I started getting violation notices for nonsense. My trash bins were visible for more than 37 minutes after pickup. My backyard fence was allegedly too rustic. They even claimed my truck, a 2012 silver workhorse with a few dents, was commercial-looking and violated aesthetics. I ignored most of it. Knew the law well enough to understand they had no authority to fine me over made-up infractions. But then they went nuclear. It was a Thursday afternoon when I came home from a job site and found yellow tape stretched across my front door and a notice slapped to the window. "Do not enter potential gas leak." I froze. My heart started pounding for a second, but something didn't sit right. There was no smell. No utility company logo on the notice. Just a Pinebrook Trails HOA letterhead and a signature from Cheryl Oakley. I walked around the house, no signs of emergency vehicles, no utility trucks, not even a maintenance guy. I went over to my neighbor Carl, who works from home and sees everything. "Hey Carl, you notice anything weird today?" He nodded. "Yeah, Cheryl and 2 of her board buddies came by around noon. They put that tape up. No one from the gas company ever showed." That was all I needed. I cut the tape, went inside, and called the actual gas company. The guy on the phone checked my address and said, "We have no record of any report or inspection at that property, sir. Can you send someone out to confirm there's no leak?" "Already on it," he said. We take false leak reports seriously. An hour later, a guy in a hard hat and steel-toed boots, Dave, I think his name was, walked through my house with a gas detector. "No signs of a leak. 0 readings. Everything's normal," he said. "And just so you know, reporting a fake gas leak is a felony in this state." Bingo. I got him to write it up, sign it, and I made a few copies. Then I went to the city building department and filed a complaint. Told them the HOA was impersonating emergency services to try and evict me. The clerk raised her eyebrows and said, "This isn't the first time we've heard about Pinebrook Trails." That was interesting. By the time I got back home, there were 2 new violation notices on my door. One for unauthorized entry into a condemned property, and another for tampering with safety signage. I laughed out loud. That night, I installed 2 motion-activated cameras, one pointed at the front porch, the other at the side yard near the fence Cheryl liked to lurk behind. I also called my lawyer buddy Jed, who owed me a favor after I rebuilt his deck last summer. "You're telling me they faked a gas leak," he said, stunned. "That's not just an HOA violation, that's criminal." "Yeah," I said. "Think you can help me make it official?" He chuckled. "Oh, I'm gonna enjoy this." The next day, I printed out the report from the gas company, the footage of Cheryl and her minions putting up the tape, and the letter they left on my door. I made a packet and dropped it off at the office of the city housing inspector, then another copy at the police station. By the weekend, things got real quiet, no more notices. No more tape. Cheryl didn't even show her face at the usual Saturday morning HOA patrol, but I wasn't done. Not even close. I wanted this on record. I wanted it public, and I wanted her gone. The silence didn't last. By Tuesday morning, I saw the white SUV with the Pinebrook Trails HOA seal slide past my house again. This time it didn't stop. It just coasted by slow enough to make a point. I caught a glimpse of Cheryl in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead like if she didn't acknowledge me, I didn't exist. I didn't wave. I just stood on the porch with a mug of coffee and let my new front camera hum quietly above me. I'd adjusted its settings to upload directly to cloud storage, with timestamps and motion log backups. No more evidence sitting on SD cards if Cheryl or her goons tried anything else. It'd be on 3 servers before they hit reverse. Later that afternoon, I headed to the city records office. I'd been thinking about what the clerk said. This wasn't the first time they'd heard about Pinebrook Trails. That stuck with me. I wanted to know how bad things had gotten before I moved in. The guy behind the counter, a tall fellow with gray streaks in his beard and a badge that read Public Records Vincent, raised one eyebrow when I mentioned my subdivision. "You a new owner?" he asked without looking up. "Bought 2 years ago," I said. "You've had complaints." He reached under the counter and pulled out a dusty green folder, thicker than a roofing manual. "You could say that, mostly sealed but some of it's public. You'll want to see this." I spent 2 hours at that table. 4 different homeowners had filed formal grievances against the HOA over the last 7 years. One claimed the board altered meeting minutes to approve a fence teardown that was never voted on. Another cited fraudulent fines used to justify placing liens on properties. But the worst one involved a couple down on Alder Grove, where the HOA had allegedly tampered with irrigation lines during a property dispute. The city inspector flagged it as intentional vandalism, but the HOA board claimed the homeowners had done it themselves for publicity. The case was quietly dropped when the couple moved out. I took copies of everything that was public record and added them to my growing stack of evidence. What I had now wasn't just a one-off mistake. It was a pattern. When I got back to the house, Jed was waiting on my porch holding a manila folder. "You're gonna want to see this," he said. Pulled Cheryl's public filings. Turns out she owns a property management company, Oakley Residential Services. Guess which HOA she's been funneling contracts to for landscaping and maintenance? "She's paying herself," I asked. "Not directly," he explained, flipping open the folder. "She's using a shell vendor. But the payments are traceable. We've got billing records, payout logs, and overlapping addresses." I leaned against the porch railing, letting it all run through my head. She faked a gas leak to evict me and padded her own pockets with HOA funds. "That's 2 felonies already, and we haven't even looked at the financials." Jed nodded. "Which is why I filed for a subpoena request this morning. I also reached out to a friend of mine at the district attorney's office. He's interested." That night, I drafted a letter to the entire neighborhood. Not through the HOA's official channel. I knew they'd block it. I printed 73 copies and walked them door to door. It wasn't fancy, just the facts. I told my neighbors what had happened to me: the fake gas leak, the city inspector's report, the false notices. And I mentioned the conflict of interest in Cheryl's financial dealings, carefully worded, backed by documentation. Every letter came with a copy of the gas company's signed report and a page of references to city records. I didn't ask them to act. I just asked them to read. By Thursday, something strange happened. People started waving at me, not the polite, passing nods you give across a lawn, real waves. One guy, Pete, I think, actually crossed the street and shook my hand. "I knew something was off about that woman," he said. "She told me my tree roots were a threat to community infrastructure." Friday morning, I got a call from the city's neighborhood oversight office. A woman named Alina introduced herself and said she was launching a formal investigation into Cheryl's conduct. Apparently, my packet and the past complaints had triggered a review. Additionally, she added, we've contacted the county prosecutor. The impersonation of emergency services is being treated as a criminal matter. By the end of the week, Cheryl was summoned to attend a city compliance hearing. It wasn't optional. I went, obviously. Wore my cleanest work shirt and brought every document I had in a black binder. The hearing was in one of those plain municipal buildings with beige walls and microphones that didn't really amplify anything. Cheryl showed up with 2 board members and an attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The city presented first. They displayed footage from my security camera, the gas company's report, and a statement from the inspector that confirmed the leak had been fabricated to justify forced removal. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't rant. I didn't raise my voice. I just laid out the timeline. The mailbox complaint, the absurd citations, the fake emergency, and the pattern of behavior pulled from public records. Cheryl's attorney tried to downplay it all as enforcement zeal, but the panel wasn't buying it. Would you define zeal as impersonating a gas leak to enter someone's home under false pretenses? One of the commissioners asked. He had no answer. By the time the hearing closed, the city announced immediate restrictions. Cheryl Oakley and the current board were suspended from HOA operations pending the outcome of the criminal case. Furthermore, Pinebrook Trails was ordered into third-party management, with a professional firm overseeing compliance and finance, one with no ties to Cheryl or her associates. The next week, a letter went out to all residents. It was brief, just 3 paragraphs, but it hit like a thunderclap. Effective immediately, Cheryl Oakley was barred from holding any HOA position or participating in enforcement actions. Any past violations issued under her authority were suspended for review. And most importantly, no further contact or notices were to be delivered to my property without direct approval from city housing oversight. I stood on my porch the next morning, coffee in hand, and watched as a moving truck pulled up in front of Cheryl's house. She didn't wave, didn't look around. Just loaded her things and drove away. The neighborhood didn't cheer. There were no signs or balloons, but Carl next door gave me a slow nod when he saw me. A few other neighbors passed by and gave me thumbs up. Justice didn't always come with fireworks, but it came. And this time, it came with receipts, signatures, and a city seal. The Monday after Cheryl's moving truck vanished over the hill, a white sedan with magnetic logos reading East County Residential Compliance Management rolled into the neighborhood and parked right in front of the HOA clubhouse. A man in a navy blazer and pressed khakis stepped out, holding a leather folio under one arm and a tablet in the other. His name was Darren Linwood, and he wasn't here to make friends, he was here to clean up. I watched from my driveway as he unlocked the clubhouse and went inside without knocking. 30 minutes later, the old board's files, binders, and laptops were being boxed up and carried out by 2 assistants. No hesitation, no ceremony, just a cold, clinical extraction of everything Cheryl's board had touched. Carl wandered over with a half-eaten apple and leaned on the fence. "That guy doesn't blink much," he muttered. "Good," I said. "Let's see what happens when someone with a spine runs the place." Darren wasn't interested in chatting with residents at first. He posted a notice on the HOA website and another at the mail kiosk. All enforcement activity was suspended pending financial and procedural audits. Residents could submit concerns via a temporary email address, but no fines, fees, or inspections would be issued until the audit was complete. It was the first time in years that Pinebrook Trails felt like a neighborhood instead of a minefield. But things didn't stay quiet for long. 2 weeks into Darren's review, I got a call from Jed. He didn't waste time with small talk. "They found something," he said. "And it's worse than we thought." I didn't speak. I just waited. "There's a secondary account registered to the HOA," Jed continued. "It's not in the official budget and it's not disclosed in any of the board's annual reports." but it's been receiving monthly deposits from homeowner dues, roughly 20% skimmed off the top and rerouted. To Cheryl, I asked. No, that's the twist. The account's under the name of a company called Greenbrier Neighborhood Services LLC. Never heard of it. Neither had the city. It doesn't exist in the state registry. No office, no employees, just a P.O. box and a bank account. And who set it up? Jed exhaled through the phone. We traced the EIN. It was filed under a man named Travis Oakley, Cheryl's nephew. That was the moment my stomach dropped. The fake gas leak was a felony, sure. But this was organized theft. They weren't just abusing power. They were systematically embezzling from the neighborhood for years. Jed met with Darren the following afternoon. I tagged along, mostly to listen, but also because I wanted to see Darren's reaction in person. He didn't disappoint. He flipped through the documents Jed brought, one after another, without pausing. When he reached the transfer logs showing the monthly withdrawals, he set the folder down and looked up. This is criminal, Jed nodded. We've already prepped the file for the DA. I'll issue a cease and desist on any remaining HOA-controlled financials, Darren said, effective immediately. And I'll send notice to the bank. If they move $1 before this is resolved, someone's going to prison. I left that meeting with a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. We'd exposed them, yes, but the more we uncovered, the bigger the rot seemed to be. The next morning, 2 unmarked vehicles pulled into the neighborhood. A man and a woman in dark suits stepped out and headed straight for Cheryl's old house. It was empty, of course, but they weren't there to knock on doors. They were there to execute a search warrant. Word spread fast. By noon, neighbors were gathered in tight clusters near mailboxes and driveways, whispering. No one knew exactly what the feds were looking for, but everyone understood the weight of it. This wasn't just a bad board anymore. This was a federal crime. Later that day, Darren called an emergency town hall. No HOA meeting had ever been this packed. People stood along the walls, sat on folding chairs, and leaned against the back exit. Darren didn't use a microphone. He didn't need to. The city has completed an initial review of Pinebrook Trails Homeowners Association, he began, his voice firm and deliberate. And we have found significant irregularities in the financial and procedural records maintained by the previous board. No one interrupted. No one looked away. We have evidence that funds were diverted to a fraudulent entity with no legal connection to this community. The matter is now in the hands of the district attorney and federal investigators. Until further notice, all HOA activity will be overseen by this office. A woman in the third row raised her hand. What happens to the dues we paid? Darren didn't sugarcoat it. Some of those funds are unrecoverable. However, the city is working with the county to establish a restitution pool. We're prioritizing residents who were fined or penalized under false pretenses. An older man near the back stood up. Are we liable for any of this? Individual homeowners are not under investigation, Darren said. But we encourage anyone who received suspicious notices or was coerced into payment to submit documentation. The more we have, the stronger the case. That night, I stayed up until almost midnight scanning every letter, photo, and timestamp I had ever collected. I uploaded them to a secure folder and submitted everything through the city portal. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. The next week brought more revelations. Cheryl's nephew, Travis, had opened 3 other dummy companies over the last 5 years. 2 were listed as landscape design consultants, and 1 claimed to provide municipal compliance training. All 3 had received payments from HOAs across the county, some legitimate, most not. Turns out, Pinebrook Trails wasn't the only neighborhood they'd bled dry. The DA held a press conference the following Friday. I watched it from my kitchen, coffee in hand, as the county's top prosecutor laid out the charges. Cheryl Oakley and Travis Oakley are being charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, falsifying official records, and impersonation of emergency personnel. The investigation is ongoing, but current evidence suggests a coordinated scheme spanning multiple neighborhoods and involving over $100,000 in diverted funds. The reporter asked if homeowners could expect restitution. "We are working with the city to recover what we can," the DA replied. "But the best thing residents can do right now is come forward with any documentation they have." Within hours, news vans started parking at the edge of the subdivision. Reporters tried to get interviews on sidewalks, but most of the neighbors just walked past them, unreadable. A few waved them off entirely. I got a call from a local paper. They'd heard about my role in exposing the gas leak and wanted a quote. I declined. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about everyone they'd tried to intimidate, silence, or squeeze dry. Darren eventually closed the clubhouse for renovations. Said it needed more than just fresh paint. Word was they found shredded documents inside a utility cabinet. Someone had tried to cover their tracks, but they hadn't gone far enough. In early spring, the city held a special election to form a new HOA board, one with actual oversight, term limits, and a rotating audit committee. I didn't run. My name got floated, but I turned it down. I'd had enough committee meetings to last a lifetime. Instead, I helped Carl and a few others start a neighborhood watch, not the kind that snooped on your lawn, but the kind that made sure no one ever got blindsided again. We kept an eye on the books. We sat in on the new board meetings. We made sure every vote was logged and every decision was transparent. And in time, Pinebrook Trails started to feel like a place where people lived, not just paid to exist. The cameras on my porch stayed up. Not because I expected more trouble, but because I knew better now. Power unchecked always finds a new angle. But so do people like me. People who know how to build things and how to take them apart. By early summer, Pinebrook Trails had changed in ways no one could have predicted 6 months earlier. Lawns still got mowed, mailboxes still stood in neat little rows, but the air felt different, like someone had finally opened a window in a house that had been shut up too long. People lingered outside longer, talked more freely. The fear that used to hang over every notice, every knock from the HOA was gone. But just because Cheryl and her cronies were out didn't mean the full damage had been repaired. The city's temporary oversight team, Darren's crew, held a public audit presentation in the community center one Thursday evening. It wasn't exactly well attended, but those of us who showed up came prepared. Darren stood beside a projector screen with a folder so thick it looked like it could stop a bullet. He didn't waste time. "In total," he said, "we've identified over $120,000 in HOA funds that were siphoned into unauthorized accounts or paid to shell vendors with no valid business licenses." He clicked through a slide showing a list of entities, none of which we recognized. These companies were created for one purpose: to receive payments that would then be routed to family members or personal accounts tied to former board members, mostly through fraudulent maintenance contracts and false invoices. A woman near the back raised her hand, visibly shaken. "Was that money just from our dues?" "It was," Darren confirmed. "And in some cases from special assessments levied under manufactured violations. We've also found 12 instances where fines were fabricated entirely, no inspection, no photographic evidence. Just typed notices with invented charges." I leaned forward in my seat. "Will that money ever come back?" Darren hesitated just long enough to answer without sugarcoating it. "Some of it, yes. The DA's office is filing asset seizure motions, but the rest. It was moved through too many layers before we caught it. Some of it's gone." Someone muttered a curse loud enough for the room to hear. No one blamed them. After the meeting, I caught Darren outside as he was locking up. "What's the deeper catch here?" I asked. "Feels like we're still only scratching the surface." He glanced up, expression unreadable. "We are, the federal side, still digging. IRS is involved now. Turns out this wasn't Cheryl's first time pulling something like this." I blinked. She's done it before, different state, different name. 5 years ago in Arizona, she was listed as a compliance consultant for a subdivision that dissolved its HOA after a similar scandal. She disappeared before charges could stick. Let me guess, no one connected the names. She used her maiden name back then. Oakley's her married name. The feds just pieced it together last week. That explained the polish. Cheryl hadn't been power-hungry by accident. She'd been rehearsed. I walked home that night with a strange knot in my chest. We'd won, sure, but we'd been marks in something bigger. And if the feds hadn't stepped in, she would have done it again somewhere else, under a different alias with a new set of neighbors to intimidate. The arrests were quiet affairs. No sirens, no drama. Travis was picked up from a warehouse office in a nearby industrial park. Cheryl was detained at a hotel 2 counties over, trying to check in under a fake ID. The DA held a press briefing the next day. This time it was outside the courthouse, with reporters crowded in front of the podium. I didn't go, but I watched the live stream. The prosecutor, a woman named Claire Mendoza, didn't hold back. Cheryl Oakley and Travis Oakley are facing multiple felony charges, including fraud, racketeering, impersonation of public officials, and obstruction of justice. We have coordinated with federal agencies to ensure that this case is prosecuted to the full extent of the law. A reporter asked if there was concern about other communities being affected. Yes, Mendoza said. We are currently reviewing HOA records from 3 additional counties. There is evidence this scheme was repeated under different names and shell companies. The weight of it hit me then. We weren't just victims of a rogue HOA, we were one seen in a multi-state con. Cheryl and Travis had built a machine out of fear, bureaucracy, and just enough legal gray area to stay hidden until someone pushed back. A week later, I got a certified letter from the city's legal liaison. Not a violation, not a threat and invitation. They were forming a new advisory panel. Not a board, not an enforcement group. Just residents who could review policies, propose reforms, and act as a sounding board for the city's temporary management firm. They wanted me on it. I went to the first meeting out of curiosity. Stayed because it felt earned. The room was nothing like the old board's setup. No head table, no clipboards of pre-written citations. Just a round table, a pot of coffee, and 5 other homeowners who'd had enough of being talked down to. Marla, a retired court clerk, started things off. We need a new covenant. Something enforceable but fair and transparent. Pete from down the street nodded. And we need to bake in the audit requirement. Every 2 years minimum, city certified. I added something else. And no more anonymous complaints. If someone has an issue, they own it. Name attached, proof required. The others agreed instantly. It was the first time I'd seen consensus form without someone raising their voice. Over the next few weeks, we rewrote the rules. Not to control the neighborhood, but to protect it. We added a clause that required any future board to undergo ethics training. We capped fines. We banned third-party vendors unless their contracts were reviewed by the city's compliance office. And we added a public portal accessible by any resident to see where every dollar went. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was ours. The city signed off on the new charter that fall. By then, the last of Cheryl's influence had been scrubbed. Her name was gone from every record, every file. The clubhouse had been repainted, rekeyed, and reopened under a new name, Pinebrook Commons. A small gesture, but a clean break. I still got the occasional letter from folks in neighboring subdivisions. Word had gotten around, and people wanted to know how we'd done it. I told them the same thing every time. Document everything, don't back down, and never assume they're playing by the rules. One night in October, I stood on my porch and watched as kids ran past in Halloween costumes. Parents chatted on sidewalks, porch lights flicked on, and the whole neighborhood buzzed in a way I hadn't seen since I moved in. Carl walked up with a thermos in hand and nodded toward the street. Feels like a place worth living in now. Yeah, I said, and one worth defending. He raised his cup. To evicting the worst HOA president in the state. I clinked my mug against his. We didn't celebrate with banners or speeches. We just stood there, watching a neighborhood get its soul back, one porch light at a time. And behind every lit-up doorway was someone who now knew the rules weren't just for residents, they were for the people in charge too.